Howdy, folks, and welcome to the 100th episode. 100th!
Yes, it's a huge milestone for TFL Talking Trucks podcast.
Indeed it is. And for this 100th episode, many of you guys have been asking us to talk about real SUVs. In other words, truck-based SUVs, because we talk about pickup trucks a lot.
Yeah.
So we decided that we would do our best of 2021 proper SUVs.
And looking at 2022 models as well that just came out.
That is correct, Amundo.
And also, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to all of you.
Yes.
I hope you had a wonderful Christmas, Kwanzaa, Festivus, and Hanukkah.
Yes, absolutely. And looking forward to hopefully a brighter and better and just more successful year for 2022.
It's always brighter. Every year is better.
Yes.
Every year, I don't care what anybody says, every year is better because you're still breathing, at least I am. So.
And that's the optimistic view that we all have.
It is.
So, before we move on, we have to thank our hugest supporters.
Yes.
From patreon.com/TFLcar. That's basically the only Patreon page we have for TFL Studios.
Right.
And recently, just a day ago, Jeremy Ty and Jason Jackson supported us.
I really do enjoy when you get tongue-tied. I'm sorry. I really shouldn't, but I do.
I even practiced
You
that.
have been practicing. You've been doing great. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Without your support, we couldn't do what we're doing right now.
Yes, and patreon.com/TFLcar, of course, if you support us there, it's a quick and easy way to communicate with us.
Yep.
Questions, comments, feedback. And also TFL-studios.com is all of our 7 channels and 4 websites. Everything we do is in one place, TFL-studios.com.
Yeah, you may notice we have a few channels and a few websites, so it does make it a lot easier to have it all in one spot. All right, so there's a lot to talk about because what's interesting is that there was a point in time just a few years ago when all of us were really certain that SUVs, now I'm talking about trucks with a frame-based SUVs, real ones.
The biggest ones.
The big ones were going away or disappearing, that they were being replaced by, unibody crossover style SUVs, and inevitably that they would be gone because they're heavier and less people wanted them. That's what we thought. That's what we thought at one point in time. And then things started to change. And now there are new players to the game, and honestly, SUVs are becoming really popular again. Really, really popular. So we've driven this year several, including some new ones, and honestly, the grip that they have on the industry is still there. And I'm thrilled about that because I really do like a big, heavy-duty SUV, especially if I'm towing or hauling a bunch of stuff. And that's exactly what these things are good at. But now they're coated in, it's been a while. They're luxurious.
And they're getting
expensive.
more so. Yeah,
and they're getting more so. Man, are they getting more so.
Yeah.
So why don't we start this list? You go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, dude. So along with your comment, I just wanted to say that, yes, so GM has been there from the beginning.
They really have.
The Chevy Suburban has, 7-8 decades now that the Suburban nameplate has been around. And it always had kind of the similar spirit, right? It's a big wagon-looking thing, now SUV, we call them, and truck-based, very capable. And, GM always had a stronghold on this segment, right?
Which they still do.
Yeah, and they still do, absolutely. Yeah. They're the best-selling, the Chevy Tahoe, the Suburban, the GMC counterparts, and also the Cadillac Escalade is part of that family. But now we have a lot more pressure and a lot more competition. Namely, I want to start with the Grand Wagoneer and Wagoneer.
You want to start there? Okay, I thought we were going to end up there. Okay.
Well, let's start there and then make it full circle.
Okay,
bring it full circle because this is the latest SUV. We actually have it in our fleet this week for testing, and you and I have been beating on it already.
Yeah, we have. We've done quite a few videos with it, and Andre will be doing a towing video with it. There's an off-road video with it. Lots of driving impressions. We're driving the crap out of it. Now, bear in mind, there are actually 2 different ones. There's the Wagoneer and the Grand Wagoneer, and they are both truck-based SUVs, whereas Jeep also produced the brand new Grand Cherokee and Grand Cherokee L. They are not truck-based. Those are different vehicles. So this is based on the Ram 1500 platform pretty much, right?
Exactly. So it has a really beefy frame. I was fortunate enough, actually, Grand Wagoneer team and Jeep had an event in New York City, for the launch of this thing. This was back in August. I was fortunate to be there, and I got to see the chassis in person, talk to the engineers. So they basically took that beefy, fully boxed frame of the truck, and they modified it slightly because they added independent rear suspension.
Right.
This is where everything is going these days.
I can't think of a single large SUV that has a solid rear axle now.
Well, the Land Cruiser just went away.
Yeah,
that had the solid rear axle. That's gone. I'm trying to think. The Sequoia is being redesigned.
Yeah.
But it also had an independent suspension.
Right.
And then the Expedition has that. Now the Tahoe Suburban and GMC,
which just recently happened.
That recently were designed with that suspension in the back. Basically, it's adding comfort. Right.
Well, and driver stability. I mean, it does help a little bit with, I guess.
And it's also actually adding interior volume because what they're able to do when you're adding independent rear suspension, you can drop the floor in the back.
Which is what they told you at the event you went to,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So you can drop the floor so you have better access to your cargo. And in the third row, you can actually sit normally. You know, the floor is actually low enough to where you can actually relax.
That is a huge benefit, but I think a lot of people out there would say, okay, but you're losing a little bit when it comes to towing and perhaps articulation for off-roading. Now, I don't know about the towing part because some of these numbers are pretty impressive still, but off-roading, I do agree, you do lose articulation. However, they're learning to compensate for a lot of that with these really big SUVs by doing some very interesting things with their suspensions.
Yeah, so as we talk through this list, how about we kind of mention some of the strongest suits and the weakest ones, right, for each one of these. So the Grand Wagoneer, I wanted to start with it because, you know, it's on our minds. You know, we're testing it. It's the newest one. The Wagoneer, like you said, is kind of the beginning, right, for them. So it starts in the $70,000 to $80,000 range, kind of in the middle there.
Right.
And then the Grand Wagoneer, you know, originally, because we knew this thing was coming years ago, right?
Well, before we jump to the Grand Wagoneer from the Wagoneer, can we just quickly talk about the Wagoneer has the smaller displacement V8. It's the 5.7.
Right.
I don't think that the Pentastar comes with it, does it?
No. And I'm kind of glad it does not. Although the Pentastar is in the Ram 1500. Right?
Yeah, which is it struggles a little bit there, but I mean it would struggle a lot with a heavy vehicle like that. So just to get a basis. So
totally.
That's where it starts, and then the Grand Wagoneer, which is the one we're currently testing, and that has the 6.4 liter V8.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the big Hemi.
Yeah.
And it sounds good.
And it matches that vehicle just perfectly. Although that engine matches most things it's in, right? Because they had the Durango with it and still have. They have the Grand Cherokee, the previous generation with it. They almost put it in the Pacifica, I think.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, if they could, they would.
The Power Wagon has the same engine.
Yes. And it's an absolutely excellent powertrain. Not the most efficient, but it sounds really good. It moves anything very quickly. What is it? 400 and what horsepower?
471.
71.
Yeah.
471. That is impressive. What's the torque?
455 pound-feet of torque. So it's not the torquiest one in the bunch.
No, but it's got the most horsepower, I believe, out of everything it competes against.
Yeah, as of this moment.
As of this moment,
because we think there are more things are brewing, especially in General Motors land, because there's a rumored high output or high performance Escalade.
Yeah.
That may be
V
coming
model.
still. So, but for now, this is the horsepower king, and it's also king on paper, at least, of towing. Because it can tow up to 10,000 pounds, which is a great round number.
Yeah.
It was a number that in recent years, manufacturers like Chevy and others have not been able to touch.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. So before that, it was like, what, 9,300 pounds or something like that?
Yeah, that was the Ford Expedition. That was the leader.
Yeah. And so this is a big jump. We know for a fact that big Hemi can pull. So the fact that it's going onto a heavy vehicle, what does it weigh, over 6,000 pounds?
Yeah.
So a big, heavy SUV, 3-row, that has independent rear suspension that's able to tow 10,000 pounds. That I never thought I'd hear.
Yeah, and I think this is where the customer base is coming from. Not just because it's luxurious and nice and big,
right?
But also a lot of people, a Chevy Traverse is fine. A Durango is okay, right? A Durango will tow 7,500 pounds, 8,000.
Even more with the big.
Sometimes they're rated a little bit higher than that, 8,500 pounds, right?
Right.
But you're kind of at the limits of that platform.
Yeah, and it's not a truck either, really. It's more like a car.
Right. Now you're getting, yes, how many people will tow 10,000 pounds with it every day? Probably almost none. But the fact that you could, that's where it's the key.
It is all about what looks good on paper.
It's knowing. So if you want to tow your horses somewhere, like the image we're showing you right now, if you want to tow big boats, big campers,
a big ass Airstream or something like that,
you can do all those things with this. So that's the idea.
With the whole family aboard and not have to worry about anything other than fuel, because I believe, was it 13 miles per gallon city?
18 highway and 15 combined. In some of my rough testing, this was not verified at the pump. I was able to get on my highway run from the office to home, I was able to get 20 mpg.
Jeez, that's pretty good.
And this big V8, the 6.4 has MDS, so cylinder deactivation.
Right.
So it can run in 4-cylinder mode.
Similar to what General Motors does with their V8s.
Yeah, and also similar to like the Power Wagon. The Power Wagon does that too, and they're heavy-duty trucks.
Yeah. So, that's a high-efficiency truck, that is.
No. But still, if you're nice to it, you can eke out a couple more MPG.
No, I am impressed with that. Yeah. I think that a lot of people out there are going to think, okay, that is a really big V8. It's impressive that it doesn't swill quite as much gas. Does it have to take super unleaded?
I think in this most luxurious version, I think it does.
Yeah, I would imagine so. So that's a little pricey. And then the other thing would be that we're expecting to see hybrid powertrains and twin turbocharged V6s sort of proliferate.
Yes.
I know that's the wrong word. They're going to dominate, I think, a lot of these classes very, very soon.
Well, that's Ford is hoping for that, right?
And so is Toyota, I think.
Yeah.
That's reasonable to assume. So, but not Stellantis, not FCA. They're sticking with the really big honking V8.
Yeah, and I think. I don't know, and this is kind of traditional view that maybe I have too, because when I look at this big SUV and coming up to it in person, it's huge.
It's huge. Yeah. It's a little. It looks bigger than a Yukon to me, and it looks very similar to a Yukon from the side, but not from the front or the back.
Yeah, coming up to this thing and then hearing it fire up. It's kind of traditional luxury. That's the image I'm getting, right?
Yeah, I got you.
If it was silent, let's say it was electric, right, and then it just pulled up, I think it would have slightly different. I don't know, connotation to it. Yeah. And maybe the styling would need to change.
Yeah, definitely different appeal to it that way. Yeah, I would agree. So, okay, so we've covered what I think you and I would agree is perhaps one of the more surprising, luxurious models out there. Yeah, the price is steep, but I think it might be competitive, at least, at first blush.
So, and they try to compete with almost every other vehicle we mentioned, so the Chevy Tahoe. But unfortunately, like the Nissan Armada, the Chevy Tahoe, the Ford Expedition, they have very, very value-minded models.
Yes, they do.
So I know, not many of them on dealer lots, but they have two-wheel drive models, very, very basic, that undercut the Wagoneer in price.
Oh, significantly.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think the vision for the Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer was to try to cover some of that, meat of that segment, a little bit more affordable, but also go after the luxury segment. So I think they have the Lincoln Navigator, the Escalade in their sights, especially like the Infiniti QX80.
Yeah.
And all those guys.
Yeah, I would agree that they really wanted to compete across the board, because if you look at it, once again, I'm going to mention the Grand Cherokee. So if you go to the Grand Cherokee and you start looking at where that enters in terms of the price and competition, that's sort of a center point that moves up class, and then you get to the Wagoneer and then to the Grand Wagoneer. So that was, I believe, Jeep's thing, is that they wanted to compete with everybody toe-to-toe in terms of product, in terms of luxury, in terms of pricing. So yeah, these are super expensive, these Grand Wagoneers. However, I recently was in a Range Rover, and I got to tell you, I think they beat Range Rover. I'm just saying in terms of interior quality and comfort and ride. It's incredible. It just is incredible.
Yeah, and I think the jury is still out. A lot of you are probably wondering, okay, what about reliability, durability?
Exactly.
We've had this vehicle for a week.
Yeah.
Right. So we still have to, see it in the market longer, see how it performs, talk to other people, see how that is done.
It's aside from, the basics, yes, we know that, any vehicle can be recalled, but the big question really is, for some of you perhaps, is just how will this hold together over time? We'll have to see over time. The good news is we do know that the 6.4 and the 8-speed are proven, and they
in other vehicles.
In other vehicles they've proven to be fairly reliable, and so that's a good start, I guess. And then with the regular Wagoneer, the 5.7 has also been proven to be a fairly reliable engine. So those are good starts. Are they high tech? No, not really. But they make up for it in terms of just raw comfort and luxury and opulence.
Yeah, and of course, this has every feature. If you choose a Grand Wagoneer, you have, this premium stereo, like I think 23 speakers. Macintosh.
That was it.
But I don't think it's related to Apple.
I don't think so.
Macintosh stereo, over like 1,300 watts of maximum output power. You have air suspension. You have, beautiful side steps that are huge.
Some of the most comfortable seats that I've been in.
With massage.
Yeah, with massage.
Yes.
Now, that was the level, we had the level 1, right?
Yeah, that was
and there's still 2 more levels available, so it's pretty incredible. Okay, why don't we move on to other vehicles, though, because there's a lot that we've driven this year.
So let's keep going with some of the kind of a mainstream vehicles and then hit more of the luxury ones, too.
Right.
So we have to start with the Chevy Tahoe and Suburban. Like we said, GM has been dominating this segment. And I think it's partially also because they always had focus on it. They had focus on the consumer versions of the Tahoe and Suburban, and also government sales, fleet sales.
Right.
They've always been very strong with it. And now it's been redesigned about a year ago, right?
Right.
And now it's, once again, bigger, larger interiors, more capable, more power options with a diesel even.
Yeah, and more luxurious too. The interior, that was one of the biggest complaints I had earlier, a couple of years ago, is that the interiors were kind of bland and old school and not great. They were okay. Now they're really nice. Also, now that they've gone to an independent rear suspension, there is more space in them. In fact, I believe that they are still the space kings. I believe that the Suburban does have the largest capacity in terms of cargo. So big vehicle, all new platform, all new interior. The one thing that is a carryover is the powertrains.
Yeah, a lot of the powertrains that they're using, the 5.3, the 6.2,
right,
one of our very familiar engines.
Yes, it is.
And the 3-liter turbo diesel is now available in most now trims of the Tahoe,
right,
and the Suburban. And now they're expanding the availability of those engines across the board.
Right.
For example, the GMC Yukon AT4 now has the big V8 option as well.
Right. And speaking of the GMC, we did drive the Yukon AT4. It was a special edition of that, too.
It was like a premium.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and once again, these are now luxury machines, too.
Oh, my God.
And the prices keep creeping up and up and up.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is a side effect. But that GMC AT4, we took off-road, and we really took it off-road. And it did remarkably well, considering how big it is. It's very, very wide, and it's one of those vehicles that you really don't want to scratch, because I think the one we were driving was how much?
Well, it wasn't 91,000. This Grand Wagoneer was 91.
Yeah.
This one was, I think, right below 80.
Yeah, that was it.
So still a lot of money for this vehicle.
Yeah, and Andre had me drive it, and I was white-knuckling it the entire time, because we did some obstacles that really could have scuffed it up, and we did actually bottom out a couple times. But the good news is that the overall setup and that newish rear end all worked remarkably well. We actually did a lot of off-roading deliberately in two-wheel drive just to see how it would respond, and it did great. Beautiful interior. Now, less than a year ago, I drove an AT4. I drove a Denali AT4.
Yeah, that was a diesel, right?
Right,
yeah.
And I drove that cross-country. And around 2,000 miles of driving, and that thing was fantastic. It got amazing mileage, great range, was smooth. I mean, it was an absolute dream to drive long distance. So really, the diesels that GM are building for these half-ton vehicles and whatnot are fantastic.
And I think that was a perfect probably use case for that, right?
Yes,
the Denali diesel.
That's why we wanted to do it.
You had to go a long ways, and it excelled at that.
Fantastic.
This big Hemi in the Grand Wagoneer may not excel at that because, It's big, but if it goes into 4-cylinder mode, maybe it will get to 20, like I said. But the diesel is well above 20.
Oh, yeah. I was, in some cases, I was close to 30. It was incredible. Anyway, but the powertrains that GM offers are probably the most diverse currently amongst heavy SUVs, large SUVs, I should say. And so they do have those 3 engine options. And then there's a rumor that I recently heard, Andre, and that is that new 2.7, well, that revised 2.7 liter 4-cylinder non-diesel, regular gas engine, but it's a turbo, but it puts out a ton of torque. I'm hearing that might actually show up in some large SUVs, which would make sense because they're already putting it in their half-ton trucks.
Yeah, totally. I think it makes sense. That rumor is viable, I think. It's not confirmed. But you know what else is a rumor? There's a rumor that Jeep will stretch the Grand Wagoneer, make it longer.
This is a recent rumor.
If you believe that.
So
it was kind of in the ether. It was mentioned once by, I think, one of the executives, and then it kind of went away for a while. But recently there was a prototype out there, and people, eagle-eyed viewers like you guys, spotted the longer length in this Grand Wagoneer. So I think the Suburban will have a competitor on its hands.
Once again, I believe that Stellantis, kind of like GM, is trying to play against everybody. And they are one step away from doing it. And by building a long wheelbase version of the Grand Wagoneer, they would have. Yeah,
it's possible.
but I mean, why not? You know, and if they're seeing demand, then why not? Just keep building for demand. You know, whether people like it or not, it doesn't matter. It matters that people actually want to buy it, and they do. I can already tell you that this Grand Wagoneer, it may not be their best seller, but it will sell well, at least right off the bat, if they can actually build them and get them to people. So it's impressive.
So let's mention the third vehicle, the third competitor. And then also I want to talk about off-roading a little bit more.
Yes, please.
We already started down the off-road path. The Ford Expedition and the Expedition Max. So the Max version is their long version.
Exactly.
Right? And the Expedition is their strictly Tahoe competitor, right?
Right.
So it's also been refreshed recently.
Recently, yeah.
Yeah, for 2022 model. Unfortunately, we weren't able to be at the debut. We didn't get an invite to that, but
which is weird.
It is weird. But you know, 2021. You know, what are you going to do? COVID and others
and other things.
So this truck, you know, now is getting a refreshed interior. They're putting that gigantic vertical screen now in there in some of the models, and the front end has been redesigned. But they're going just one engine, you know, option, right? Which is their twin turbo 3.5 liter EcoBoost. It's their only solution, but it has a couple different like tunes, right? Depending on which version you buy, you can get a little bit more horsepower, a little bit more torque.
Right.
It's almost like the high output Raptor version of the engine, but it's not to that extent. It's just you know, different versions of that twin turbo.
Now, almost 3 years ago, I think it was, that you and I went to California and actually picked one up and drove it back here. It was a video series, a 2-part series we did where we raced a Suburban that came in from Chicago. We came in from Malibu, California. And we actually took that Ford off-road in Moab.
Yes.
Yeah, and it did fairly well. And it was an interesting vehicle. One that I was kind of hoping that they would go a step further with, and they may actually do it. They may have an off-road version coming soon, like a real dedicated one.
Well, they're also working on the Timberline versions.
So
they're trying to spice it up, but we haven't driven one.
No, we haven't. So until we do, we really can't talk about it much. But that is an impressive vehicle, but they need to now apply what they've done with the F-150 in terms of interior quality, and that has to be applied to the new, hopefully they've done this, to the 2022 Ford Expedition. And also, by the way, we should move on to the Navigator later on, but overall, they have been improving, but there are some spots that I found that I think
that they could refine still.
Indeed,
absolutely,
exactly. So I just wanted to mention that.
Absolutely. So, like we said, GM SUVs, the big boys, have been dominating.
Yeah.
Sometimes they were like 75% of sales overall.
But Ford has increased.
Yeah, Ford has increased. That was several years ago. Now Ford is here in a big way. They're trying to, chip away at that lead.
Right.
And they're doing it to some extent.
Yes.
With a lot, like we said, value-minded offerings, off-road versions, this most recent Timberline version. that they're actually pretty proud of. I was recently on a Ford Bronco event in Nevada. Did I say that correctly? Nevada?
Yeah, that's fine.
So a lot of people give me grief.
Oh, let them give you. It doesn't matter what we say. People can yell at us.
Well, I have an accent anyway.
So do I.
Anyway, so some of the engineers at Ford, they wanted me to drive the Timberline. And we haven't. We haven't had a Explorer Timberline, actually, or the Expedition.
Well, why would they want to give it to people who are up in the Rocky Mountains and have the snow
and can see the Timberline from our office?
Literally can see the Timberline, and also and we have this whole outdoor lifestyle thing going on. Why bother, right?
So we'll see. I mean, obviously, this coming year we'll hopefully get our hands on it, but like we said, they're trying to expand their offerings.
Right.
They have the long wheelbase. They already have that covered.
Right.
So they also have, to a large extent, the fleet sales. They sell a lot of fleet vehicles as
well.
They
do, yeah.
So they're actually pushing GM, and I think that's why GM is, expanding their offerings and, expanding their engine availability.
Which is smart.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, on both ends. It's great. Competition is the best thing in the world for you guys and for everybody. And I love the fact that Ford is out there pushing GM, and then they're pushing right back. But what that also means is that there are other players out there that are kind of, I wouldn't say they're going by the wayside, but maybe they're not getting the coverage they deserve.
Well, let's talk about one.
Yes.
The Nissan Armada.
Bingo.
Yes.
Yeah, I
recently
actually
drove one.
Yeah, and it's been refreshed significantly. It actually got a real refresh. So exterior, slight redesign with the front end and the rear end. But the interior redesign is really the notable part. The all-new central IP thing with the screen that's, 12.3 inches, I think?
No, I think there's slightly smaller.
Is it smaller?
Yeah, but once again, I think you nailed it. The new Armada, this most recent 2022 model that they just came out with, the interior, I hate to say it, it's almost basically Infinity quality.
I know. I look at that and I'm just like, why bother?
Infinity is a great interior, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
We will.
But this Nissan Armada is pushing the limits of that.
It is, and we recently took one off-road. We actually took it off-road against a RAV4, a 4Runner, and just for fun. And Andre, you got to drive that off-road a lot, and I was watching you from the outside and watching the articulation. Nissan has a really good thing on their hands when it comes to four-wheel independent suspension with decent articulation. As I said, I mean, you're a big-ass SUV off-road, and you were able to go over almost everything by maintaining full wheel contact, which is the whole point.
And then the Armada also has this distinction of being one of the more affordable entries.
Exactly.
Right. So they have the base model, which is, I believe, just under $50,000 to start.
That's a two-wheel drive version. Yeah, but you still get a lot of the interior components, the nicer interior. Granted, it's not the fully, the plush one, but it's still fairly loaded, and you get it standard with the 5.6 liter V8 and that 7-speed automatic transmission, and that's standard. There's no smaller displacement engine or anything like that.
Which is weird. They didn't go to 9.
Yeah, that's a big conversation. Yeah.
Yes. Which is a little bit odd. So I think the Nissan Armada obviously doesn't have the same sales numbers, anywhere closer to what Ford and GM is doing.
Wouldn't you agree? It's a really well put together, solid SUV.
I think it's underappreciated.
Big time. Actually, if we went back a year ago when they were still selling Sequoias, I would take an Armada over a Sequoia. I know that sounds weird to a lot of you guys out there, but I'm telling you, the Armada is really, really good, and it's overlooked. Yeah.
So we talked about the previous manufacturers, right, expanding their range. I think Nissan could expand theirs too. I'm still waiting for the Pro 4X Armada.
Wouldn't that be great with a locker?
I think there's room for that in their lineup, and they will fight exactly against the Z71 Tahoe, the AT4 GMC, and now the Wagoneer, which also has some decent off-road chops, as we found out.
Yeah. The Wagoneer is a very different type of beast compared to that one, though. And the one thing about the Nissan Armada is that it is based, of course, on the Nissan Patrol, which, as you guys know, overseas is a proper off-road vehicle, and it has a lot more available overseas than it does here. So the components exist, is my point. So putting a locker in it, giving it a lift, putting larger proper off-road tires on it, and slapping some stickers on it, honestly, I think it would increase your sales, Nissan, but that's up to them, of course. I really think they should do it.
I agree. I think there's room, especially in their price range for that, and also the image. the image of that off-road capability.
Precisely.
And also capability.
Yeah.
Not just the image.
Yeah.
But also capability.
Yeah, I really do think that they're missing the boat by not doing it.
The Toyota Sequoia rounds out this truck-based full SUV, more of a basic SUV segment. And it's basically, it's going to be redesigned soon. So that's the rumor and that's the information. Toyota has not come out and said it.
No,
but prototypes are there.
Right.
Right. So, and it's going to be, like you alluded to, it will most likely be twin turbocharged and share a lot of the components with the new 2022 Tundra.
Well, they did officially announce that it would have the TNGA-F platform.
Okay.
Which
is a Tundra platform.
Which is a Tundra platform. So it would make sense that it would also receive the Tundra Powertrain, which, this is no surprise, folks. We're talking about something that has more power, more torque, and, is higher efficiency numbers than the old V8 that, unfortunately, as awesome as it was, just isn't as efficient. So that's one of the reasons, better performance. I believe it's lighter too. So all these things that line up make for the possibility of a new Sequoia being a pretty incredible one. Honestly, this current one is ancient. It's one of the oldest vehicles out there, period.
Yeah.
In terms of design.
So it was this chassis that's currently on sale. It was last redesigned like 07, 08. So it's reaching on to 14, 15 years.
Yeah, nearly Tommy's age.
Yeah, almost. But what I think it's also a little bit underappreciated in its four-wheel drive form and also their TRD Pro form that they have. It's coming up to it, it's also very, very spacious and roomy, climbing inside of it. But you could tell the age, obviously, from some of the interior.
Really, that's my big issue.
But the utility is there, I think.
Oh, it's a great vehicle, and I wasn't trying to put it down by saying I would take the Armada over it. I'm saying that the Armada has enough new kit to make it feel contemporary, whereas in the Toyota really does feel like I'm buying a 10-year-old vehicle, by comparison. So that's my issue. But it's going away. We know that. Everybody knows that. So it will be replaced by something that is hopefully more athletic and more economical, at least at the pump.
So what do you think will happen in 2022, this coming year? Let's look forward 12 months. Okay, to this time next year. Do you think GM will maintain its huge lead?
Yes, I do. But,
you do?
But I have a theory,
okay.
And this absolutely is just a theory. It's not even a rumor, folks. This is just something that I think would be logical for Ford to do. What's the powertrain that you have in your truck right now?
It's a hybrid.
Right. And I think that powertrain inside of a Ford large SUV makes a ton of sense. It would be highly efficient, highly capable, probably the fastest damn thing out there.
And also add utility.
Well,
export power, whatever.
Export power and whatever, yeah. I think that Ford would be really smart to consider putting that powertrain inside their Expedition. They already have a hybrid Explorer, right? They have, they're adding
the groundwork
power.
is laid.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
So they have it. Why not do it and try to strike before other guys do it to say you're first, which I know matters. But I think it would increase your sales having that as an option.
Dude, you know what? I'm surprised. This most recent, the 2022 Expedition and also the Navigator refreshes. Navigator. The Navigator almost looks the same. It's been refreshed.
Yeah, I know.
But still, I'm surprised they're not already hybrids. I am
too.
That's my opinion once again. I think something happened in some of the shortages and some other issues that we've had in the industry this year, that something got pushed back slightly. That's my impression of it. This is not Ford's statements. But I think I was already expecting them, like you were saying. I think if they do that, they could chip away at GM a little bit more in a bigger way. And of course, Toyota Sequoia, if it comes by the end of 2022, which it should, and we're expecting it to do, that could chip away at some of this as well.
I would agree. By the way, you mentioned delays and things being pushed around with Ford. Well, that is indeed true. As a matter of fact, they had to move around some PHEV models that they were supposed to start on in order to increase their production of the Ford Mustang Mach-E because they're tripling the amount of
because it's
production.
Popular right
it's
now.
Super popular, so they're just going to crank them out. And because of that, other PHEVs are being moved over, and not completely sidelined, but temporarily pushed back. And perhaps something like that happened that wasn't announced with the possibility of an upcoming PHEV, or not PHEV, but just regular,
just a hybrid,
hybrid version of these big Fords. That would be awesome, by the way. So let's move on though, because we have more to cover.
Yeah, totally. We have some of the more luxurious vehicles coming,
right?
And we're not mentioning things like, for example, the Rivian R1S, right? It's technically, it's a new animal, right?
It is,
and it's also large, 3-row, electric. Mm-hmm. But I think they sold 2 of them so far, and one went to RJ Scaringe, who is the CEO.
Yeah.
So it's not really a sale. I mean, it is a sale, but it's to the employee of the company.
Right. And on top of that, to be honest with you, there are a lot of other 3-row vehicles that we're not covering in this list, because in my mind, to make them onto truck, they have to have something that is truckish, which is a frame. And those don't have it. New. So let's cover the luxury vehicles.
Let's cover the ones that do have them. So on this segment, we already kind of talked about the Yukon XL and the Yukon. But Escalade we haven't mentioned much. Let's talk about the Cadillac Escalade.
Yeah, they really surprised me with that one.
Lincoln Navigator we mentioned briefly, but
we'll go back to that.
Dig a little bit more. QX80, let's dig in a little bit more. And then this all-new LX600, which is the new Lexus.
Yes, which I'm very happy that they've decided to build.
And we actually saw that at the Los Angeles Auto Show. I actually got some time to actually sit in the new Lexus, so that's all goodness.
Yes, it is. So why don't we start at, I would say at the bottom sales-wise, which I think would be the QX.
Probably. I don't have the exact sheet in front of me, and some of these companies don't report sales until the quarter ends.
Right, but last time the QX was, it wasn't too bad. In fact, do you know that still the largest state for consumption of the QX is California? You know where a majority of those are?
I was going to say Bay Area.
No, Southern California. Beverly Hills. It's interesting. It really does appeal to certain people of a certain financial level. I guess that maybe they have to tow some, horses occasionally, or, I don't know, slaves, or I don't know, something like that.
Wow. No, I think it's mostly... I think part of it is status, I would say. Right? That's where the Lexus badge, the Infiniti badge come in, I think. The Cadillac badge to some extent. I think it's status and just being cuddled by an SUV, if that's such a thing.
But what's so strange about the QX is that they did recently do an upgrade with that one as well. So they kind of tightened it up a little bit on the outside, and then the inside had some upgrades. And it's a really pretty interior. My wife loves riding in the new QX. It really is very nice. However, honestly, I cannot justify the financial disparity between that and the Nissan Armada. The Armada is so good that I just don't understand why someone would want the QX. You know what I mean? It's just, and they're basically the same vehicle underneath.
Yeah, basically, the chassis, the powertrains.
But I think the QX does have a little bit more power.
It used to. So you know how the QX, basically required premium fuels. Most of these SUVs, by the way, require premium.
Yeah, they do.
We're now in this rarefied air. But now they made the Armada engine also capable of increasing its power levels based on premium fuel. So now they're even closer together.
Right, and they both 5.6 liter V8s. They both have the 7-speed automatic transmission. And we've driven both of them extensively. To be honest, we got a lot of those. And I just don't. It's a perfectly fine vehicle. I just think that the Armada is so damn good that it just wouldn't make any sense to get the QX.
I think once again it's kind of a status thing.
Yeah, right? I'm sure you're right.
So I mean, you and I may not. I have a work truck. I bought an F-150 work truck. So I don't know if we're experts of status.
Well, but we have family who are, and but more importantly, and I get it. You could say the same thing about Cadillac versus say a Suburban, but this one is different for me, at least, just in terms of when I look at them side by side. But nonetheless, they have made some improvements, and they appear to be on the same trajectory as they were last year. They're going to still build them. They're still going to sell them. And apparently people in Beverly Hills like them.
Yeah, and they have some new trims, slight accessories, colors. And, recently, I think we test drove one about a year ago, which had that kind of stormtrooper look, the black trim on white. So, which I thought was very attractive.
It was, as I said, my wife absolutely loved that one when I brought it home.
So, and then of course, I think we have to mention the Lincoln Navigator. Volume-wise, I think they're near each other. Once again, we don't have the latest numbers from this year because it hasn't closed yet technically. But the Navigator, you know, it was redesigned. It was all new, right? It came out a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago. Now they've updated it. They refreshed it for 2022. And once again, I don't know if they went far enough with the refresh. If you look at two of them, the previous one and the next one, side by side, you will be able to tell some, differences. But if you see it on the street, you may not know it's a new one.
I would agree with you. I have to squint to really be able to, and make sure they're not moving so I can see the differences from the outside. I still think that they need to up their game interior-wise, still. And that's my biggest disappointment with the Lincoln, is the fact that it's their best-selling Lincoln, the Navigator. I believe it was, at least. And there's so much potential there, and they're just not quite stepping up to their game. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it needs a hybrid. It needs something to jazz it up, right?
But on top of that, it needs something to really make it different than its competitors.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. Yeah. It's not that different. Yeah, okay, the powertrain is, but the powertrain is also very similar to what you can get on a Ford. So once again, it's a question of what else makes it different. And I just don't think it's that different, But to be fair, I drove one around quite a bit, actually, a couple years ago before the refresh, and it handled beautifully. It was super quiet. And that's the one thing about Fords, is that they're able, and Lincoln, super, super quiet. But once again, I just really wish that they'd have something just to perk it up a little bit more.
I agree. And I think if they do, they will see their sales improve.
I would agree.
Because I just looking at the numbers, they were kind of, flattish. Their sales were not going down necessarily too much or up too much.
Right.
It was kind of about status quo. I think they may need something like that hybrid powertrain. Just give it a more push.
Exactly.
The pizzazz.
Exactly.
Efficiency, power, whatever.
And maybe another interior update, to be honest with you. It's got to be as good, if not better, than the F-150, and I don't think it is. Okay, so then from there...
Well, I think the Lexus is in this space.
Wow, yeah.
And it's been very successful as it is. It's just a steady vehicle that just always gets the sales it kind of wants, or what Lexus wants from it. But now it's all new.
Right.
New platform, once again, TNGA-F, which is shared with the Tundra and some others.
Right.
And twin turbocharged power.
Yeah.
But no hybridization yet.
Which is crazy, because I thought it would. Because overseas, So for those of you who don't know, they basically got rid of the Land Cruiser here in the United States, which hurts. And what we were hoping is that when the Land Cruiser was reintroduced as the new model overseas, that we would get a version of it via Lexus. And we kind of did, but we also kind of didn't.
Yeah, and so what we did get, the new LX 600. First of all, it's a new name. It was LX 570 with the V8 powered. Now it's not. Now it's twin turbocharged power, 10-speed automatic, just like the Tundra. Which actually, if you look at the Tundra, we have a long-term Tundra in our fleet. That's a really good powertrain. Lots of torque, very easygoing powertrain.
Yeah, surprisingly easygoing.
And also relatively efficient. It's not going to blow you away with efficiency, because it's not a hybrid still. Right. But the power is really good. The torque is there, 400 and almost 500 pound-feet of torque, in fact.
Right.
Lexus takes the torque just a little bit higher than, of course, Toyota Tundra. But the interior they redesigned. But they kept the whole... See, Lexus LX never competed against those long wheelbase versions, right? It was always relatively small wheelbase.
By comparison,
maybe
190. Or there was there's a number that was considered the perfect number or something.
It's the perfect number considered by Toyota. It's what the Series 80 Land Cruisers used to be. The Series 100, 200, 300. I think it's like 110 inches or something.
Yeah, there was a specific
number, but it's in millimeters too.
Yeah,
of course. So it's a very specific wheelbase, because they decided that that's a great combination for on-road performance and also off-roadability, because off-roading was always important.
So can this Lexus off-road? I haven't seen it at all.
I don't know.
Did it have a low range? And
Yeah, it does. It does have 4-low, but once again, it has kind of low-hanging body components.
Right.
And by that, I don't mean the frame. I mean like the bumper covers, the side steps, that type of stuff.
Which is what Lexus has been doing for years and years.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, a smart guy will go and tear them off and turn it into a proper 4x4. But whatever.
So, and they even when they debuted the Lexus LX, they showed it running in the desert, right? And it has the most clever suspension. I want to test it side by side with the Grand Wagoneer, in fact.
Really?
Because the suspensions are supposed to be that good.
And they really do compete if you think about it, too. They both have frames. They're both relatively expensive, or extremely expensive, I should say. But they're both very luxurious and off-road capable.
And off-road heritage, lots of heritage in this space, right? So this is going to be interesting. I hope we get the LX600. I think actually Roman is going to be testing it later in January.
Oh, great.
So stay tuned for that. And if we can bring it here for some competitive running, we will do that for sure.
That sounds really good. Okay, cool. Yay.
So then we have to go to the Escalade. I mean, the Escalade and to some extent the GMC brothers, the Yukons, they still were and are basically sales popularity leaders in this space. Of course, the Yukon sells a little bit more than the Escalade, but the Escalade has also been redesigned recently. The other thing that GM is really going after is the self-driving aspect of it, right?
Oh, so they got the Super Cruise.
The Super Cruise semi-autonomous system came out last year in the Escalade. And now it's the latest system available on this truck. Who else is doing it? Well, I think Ford, the latest F-150s.
Blue Cruise, I think.
Blue Cruise.
Yeah.
Super Cruise and Blue Cruise.
Yeah,
Actually, they're fighting about the names.
I'm sure they are.
Yeah. The lawyers are going at it. But so Lexus offers, speaking of some semi-autonomous technologies, these are not full self-driving. These are systems where the driver still has to pay attention. Although on some pre-mapped highways, the vehicle will steer by itself and drive on its own. Lexus has a system approaching that level, but the LX, this most recent one, it's not available at launch, as far as I understand.
Gotcha.
So maybe GM has a slight edge here.
I would say they do, and they were smart to push a lot of PR. So Super Cruise now goes throughout their entire lineup in terms of General Motors trucks. And now, recently, they announced that they are able to use Super Cruise with a trailer, which is something they weren't able to do before.
Right.
So, and Super Cruise really is more for highway use than it is for street use.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah. And they've been pushing it real hard. It's a tech that they want to kind of make their own. And because of that, and because the PR for once was actually pretty damn smart about getting the name out, everybody recognizes it. I don't think as many people recognize Blue Cruise on Ford.
Or other systems.
Yeah, right. Or these other autonomous systems, other than perhaps Tesla, which is a whole different thing. So, yes, they have that, and it's available on the majority of their models. For Cadillac, the really cool thing is that you can get an Escalade with a diesel engine, with Super Cruise, and cruise like
endlessly.
endlessly. You can make it a third, well, not a third, but you can make it a quarter of a way across the United States on a tank of fuel if you plan it correctly.
Yeah.
That's how damn efficient they can be. And then we're talking about a massive Escalade, which is an impressive vehicle and also one that I love and hate at the same time. I can't stand the wheels. They're always way too big, and it's just useless for off-roading. But
22s?
it just doesn't make any sense to me. But for looks and status, I totally get it.
Well, here's the thing with GM, and I think this extends not just the Cadillac Escalade, but also the Yukon lineup.
Right.
We already mentioned the AT4, the Denali lineup, which is also very luxurious and close to where Escalade is.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think, once again, there needs to be something to spark another, really something exciting. And I'm talking about power. Very, very soon, there'll be more electric vehicles here in this space with monstrous horsepower numbers. And here it is, the Cadillac still has 420 horsepower. Right? Which is decent.
Yeah, sure.
But once again, similar to the Navigator comment, right?
Right.
There needs to be something extra. And I think that's where the rumor with the V is coming from.
Well, no, it's not.
It's actually more than a rumor.
It's more than a rumor because I believe on TFLtruck.com there are some photos of what we believe is a Cadillac Escalade V or some sort of V variant.
The prototype's been out for months.
Right.
And months and months.
And it's got a quad exhaust, a real one, not some sort of fake one or whatever. And from what we hear, quite literally, it's supposed to sound like an absolute banshee, which indicates to me that it could be the Corvette engine.
Or some sort of a supercharged version of a V8.
Yeah.
Which I think. So here's what happens when I'm looking at the 6-figure price tag, right? Mm-hmm. And most of these are at or above 100,000.
Right.
If you get a loaded Escalade, it's above 100.
Which is just insane.
A loaded Navigator is above 100. QX80, pushing 100, not quite, maybe.
I think the most expensive one I saw was 90. But
90 something.
Yeah.
A Lex also pushing 100, but maybe not quite so there.
Right.
Also, we're not mentioning Range Rover. Technically not a truck frame.
Yeah. So it's not in this
for at least for us, for US. Mm-hmm. So when I'm thinking about that much money, and that has to circling back to the Grand Wagoneer. I'm really glad they used that 6.4 because it gives them the horsepower advantage, right? Mm-hmm. 471, it's 51 horsepower more. And I know it may not matter when you go into the grocery store, but when I'm talking to my neighbor, I'm saying, you know what? I have 51 horsepower more than the Escalade. That's when it matters because it's status, it's symbol. So the Escalade needs more power, the Navigator needs more power, the QX80 needs more power. I think the LX needs more power.
Okay, so
more power to the people.
I know, seriously. You go, Andre. Yeah, we solved the whole issue right here. Is that everybody needs more power, and this is a nice golden period because things are going to change rapidly. There are requirements that are coming up in the near future that will make these big V8s and these gas guzzlers extinct, frankly. So I think that you're going to see more and more electrification very soon. And I think progressively, at the very least, you'll see hybrids and then probably plug-ins, and then we'll see where that goes. Mm-hmm. But the real question is, what's going to happen with the horsepower war? I think that Andre is absolutely right, that Cadillac is probably going to try to kick back over and try to make
over the Grand Wagoneer,
right, which is now the Power King. And then, of course, there's going to be probably a Hellcat that they're going to throw inside the Grand Wagoneer, but they won't call it a Hellcat because that's unsophisticated. And then 700 horsepower. Something. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Well, it's a luxury SUV.
I mean, why not? While you still can do it, right?
There's no ceiling there. I mean, would you pay $100,000 for a current Escalade or $130,000 for the supercharged one? I think you'd probably pay $130,000 for the supercharged one. So easy to say. Or whatever. Or
when we don't have that type of money, it's so easy to say, oh yeah, you go out paying another $30,000. But at the same time, they have to fight. They have to have a halo version of each one of these vehicles, right? They want to get you into the dealership. Even if you don't get that one, maybe you'll get the less expensive one, which is the whole point. And so will they go and continue this horsepower war with now the luxury segment of proper SUVs? I think they will. Mm-hmm. I think you're right. And it's going to get crazy. And I love it. I love it because I know it's limited. It's, I would say within the next 5 years, things are going to change drastically.
Yeah, and even if it's electrified, there's still power. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying, let's not electrify. I'm just saying I think these vehicles are now at this status level where I want everything. If I'm going to pay that money,
you might as well just get it all.
I want the massage seats. I want the high power numbers. I want, 23 speakers playing music at me. All that stuff.
Yeah, I'm not going to do,
I want that.
And I do know people, people who are at that financial level where they could afford something like this and perhaps would. What's interesting is that I really do think that the Grand Wagoneer, the way it's currently designed, does fly under the radar. And I think there are people out there who really like it. But also there's another thing to consider, and that is, in the future, we may be seeing some other players come into this realm, perhaps not with a frame-based SUV, but Genesis and some of these other companies that have been quiet about really big SUVs, they may surprise us too.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. There's been some concepts from Hyundai and Genesis, kind of hinting at bigger vehicles, right?
Right. So, and once again, the Palisade and some of those other vehicles are not included because we're only talking about really SUVs that have a frame.
Yeah, and once again, I think there's space for this, and the segment is growing, like we just mentioned.
Yeah.
There is need for this because not only, yes, there's a luxury side of it, but also capability side, right? If you don't want a truck, if you have no use for the bed, right, you want more people carrying capacity,
right?
But you still want to tow. These are the vehicles that would do it. Yes, you can tow, 7,000 or 8,000 pounds, like we said, maybe with a Durango. You can tow 5,000 pounds with a 4Runner, but when you need when you have bigger trailers, more toys, this is the only way to go.
I agree. And after doing this a lot, and I've towed with a Suburban full of people, it was interesting, and this is years ago, but that vehicle drove beautifully. It towed fine. This is early days of them still using the 5.3. And it still did a really good job towing. I think it was 6,000 pounds, and I had 7 people inside with gear and no problem. And that's part of the point. Yes, the numbers for some of these unit body 3-row SUVs are pretty impressive. But if you really load down one that has a frame, that's why we're talking about these, they can handle a lot, and you can still beat the crap out of them, and they'll take it. They're strong. And that's one of the most important components here, is the fact that you're talking about rugged capability and at the same time utility. You can do a lot with these things. And I'm guessing that people will still see that because there's even more of them out there now.
Yeah. And maybe even looking forward once again, maybe the next frontier also is not Nissan, but the next level would be like 4-wheel steering. More capability. These things are getting bigger and longer.
Yeah.
So, more maneuverability, maybe, and of course, more complexity. But hey, when you have massaging seats and 23 speakers, where else can you go?
Yeah, I know. And complexity, a lot of us find it as a dirty word. I do. But at the same time, I get it. You want all your toys. You want to be able to communicate with 50 different people at the same time and get your texts and get your massage and have your panoramic roof and have air suspension and all these things. Everything that you add, of course, could be something that goes wrong later. But the good news is these products have, in many cases, been around for a while, and as such are becoming more and more robust and hopefully can last longer. This is hopefully. And with these massive SUVs that are so expensive, you want it all. So why not get it all, right?
Absolutely. And I just want to say, as we close down, once again, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you for sticking around with us for 100 episodes.
Yes.
We'll see you in 100 more, right?
Yeah. And once again, guys, with the Patreon and just for viewing us and listening to us, thank you very much. Your support helps us make this happen.
Yeah, whether you're here just on a TFL Talk channel on YouTube or you're just listening on your favorite podcast platform, thank you for listening and or watching.
Yes, and let us know what you think. I'm curious to your perspective. Would you buy one of these? Why would you? Why wouldn't you? I know a lot of people, why wouldn't you? Okay, that's an easy one. But why would you? Why would you buy one of these really expensive, high roller, frame-based SUVs? I'm curious to what your point of view is, so please let us know below.
Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.